So to do the honors in helping present these highly prestigious awards, may I please invite on stage, amidst your applause, the chairman of Maruti Suzuki India, R.C. Bhargava. Huge round of applause, please. And joining him, the editor of ET Auto, Nabil Khan. If we could have both of you gentlemen on stage, please. So for our first category, which we've called the ET Auto Global Indian of the Year Award, it goes to the chairman of Samvardhana Motherson Group, V.C. Sehgal.
Sky was the limit for Chairman Vivek Chand Sehgal when he laid the foundation of the Samvardhana Motherson Group in the mid-1970s with just ₹1,000 in his pocket. Of this, his mother contributed the major chunk of ₹633, which gave birth to the company's name Motherson. At a time when other fledgling auto component companies mushroomed around the Maruti Udyog business in the 80s era, Sehgal expanded his horizon to foreign shores and never stopped growing. Tapping joint ventures, mergers and acquisitions to catapult himself on the world stage. Today, with a slew of over 370 companies spread across 37 countries and 25 joint ventures under its belt, this Samvardhana Motherson Group ranks amongst the largest auto component players in the world.
I think I wish I could take the credit that yes, I thought so and this happened and all that, but to be honest with you, nothing of that was there. A lot was about survival. The first 15-20 years was all about survival. I think the first 15-20 years was all about learning. I was very lucky to get some amazing customers who could teach me as well and do business with them as well.
With a top line of over $9.1 billion or about ₹58,000 crore posted in the last financial year, the group has now set its target on achieving a revenue of $26 billion or about ₹167,000 crore by 2020. Of this, the lion's share will come from its listed entity, Motherson Sumi Systems. That's not all. Sehgal plans to float a new healthcare vertical as part of the group's diversification and add 16 new greenfield facilities to boost its auto domain as it continues to chug ahead to fresher pastures in the future.
Sir, I think this audio visual so beautifully captures all that you've accomplished, all that you've contributed to the industry, and for that we applaud you. And our second award is in the category of the ET Auto Innovator of the Year. And the award goes to the co-founder and vice chairman of Sun Mobility, Chetan Meni.
I started my journey over 25 years ago racing solar cars, and the idea was, could we really create solutions for India that could be meaningful for society and have an impact in a common man's life. Working electric vehicles over the last 20 years has taught me that to see how we could create newer solutions. The current issues I see around range anxiety, long refueling time, and large and high costs are something that had to be fundamentally addressed. For us, this is an important area, and the technology has been a large portion of trying to get this to a reality.
This award is truly deserved, and it offers us a great glimpse of all the effort that you've put into reshaping our industry. And with that, Mr. R.C. Bhargava, if I could ask that you please remain on stage for a few moments longer, because the question on many people's minds is that, is it time to trade in the internal combustion engine for the lithium-ion battery? Or what technology stands a better chance? Is it hydrogen fuel cell, or is it hybrid? So to offer a glimpse of what this new age mobility era has on offer, I ask that you please address our August gathering, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm supposed to talk on Mobility Next 2030. And the question of mobility is extremely important for our country today. Mobility has so many facets that it's not easy to decide a policy on mobility without looking at all the facets which I'm talking about. Because I have seen that people talk of mobility with only one aspect of mobility in mind. But no mobility policy can succeed unless it harmonizes all the aspects of mobility which are important for a country and the people of that country. For example, mobility is extremely important for determining the productivity and efficiency levels of an economy. Today, India is determined to accelerate its manufacturing growth, improve the quality of life of the people, and grow the economy, hopefully at 9 or 10% a year, every year for the next 25 years. Now, for that, a very efficient system of mobility, both for people and for goods, is an absolute essential. It cannot be done if you don't have the highest efficiency levels in your mobility system. At the same time, we've seen, and not long ago, very, very recently, that mobility today in India, which is dependent on fossil fuels which are imported from a few countries, and given the politics which global politics, which is involved in the oil business, the aspects which a country needs to worry about is both the security of supplies of the oil over the long term, and equally important for a country like India, the cost of importing oil. President Trump relaxed some sanctions on Iran, but supposing it had not been done, what would have been the implication? If Iran oil was totally cut off, what would have been the impact on prices? How much could we have managed without that? So both cost of oil, which is extremely important because we are not a country which has such high exports that we can pay for any amount of oil at any price. We can't do that. We have to keep in mind that the cost of importing oil is going to remain, as far as I can see, very, very important for us. Along with this is the impact on the environment. All of us living in Delhi now don't need to be told about environment. And over the next 12 years that we are looking at till 2030, if the current growth rate of around 8 to 9% continues in the entire automobile industry, and that includes two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, and commercial vehicles. The impact on the environment is only going to get worse. It cannot get better because the volumes are going up faster. And the total import of fossil fuels, if nothing is done to curtail this, may reach to 3 times the requirements which it has today in the transportation mobility area. I don't think we can afford that. So the mobility policy has to take into account all these factors, that the automobile industry constitutes almost 50% of the manufacturing industry of India. We have to keep making more and more in India to create the jobs, to grow manufacturing, which is the basis of our growth. At the same time, we have to worry about energy security and the related issues of environment, quality of life, and so many other things, that unless we have a harmonious policy, that policy is not going to work. Somewhere in that, the whole question of shared mobility will also come in. Now, many advisors have been coming to India and telling us how we can solve our problems of environment and energy use and all of that. The difficulty I have seen, as far as I am concerned, is that the requirements of the Indian mobility situation and what is happening in India and is not at all similar to what is happening virtually in any other part of the country, of the world, or what has happened anywhere else in the world. And some of our problems are quite unique to us almost. Let's see the first big difference. The first big difference is today we are the fastest growing automobile industry anywhere in the world. China has even plateaued out largely. The rest of the world is not growing. And the whole question of a mobility policy which is based on an industry which is growing 8 to 9% are very different from the issues which are affecting a mobility policy where the growth is now stagnant. And please keep that in mind because it has many implications if you analyze it. The second difference is that India is uniquely a small car market, a small, comparatively low-cost car market. 75% of the cars sold in India are low-cost cars. What does it mean? It means that solutions which you find for mobility, for reducing the consumption of fossil fuels, have to take into mind the fact of the affordability of people who are buying small cars. And it's not as if small car buying here is without logic. If you look at the infrastructure in the cities today, I doubt if anybody will ever recommend buying a big car, looking at the traffic conditions here. And even people who can afford big cars also keep a small car for when they have to go and park the car somewhere. So small cars and the impact of small cars on policy have also to be kept in view, and this 75% is there. The third, and perhaps the biggest challenge here we have in India, which is really found only to a limited extent elsewhere, China perhaps and Taiwan, is that we have a huge volume of two-wheelers which are used for commuting purposes. Nowhere in the West or in Japan, in fact the developed world, are two-wheelers used for commuting the way they are used for commuting in India. Three-wheelers also add on to the two-wheeler thing, which is again fairly unique in India, not entirely unique, but fairly unique. And therefore this question of two-wheelers and three-wheelers and what to do with them becomes an issue, because roughly 2/3 of the petrol which is consumed in India is by two-wheelers. If people thought that cars are the biggest users of petrol, it's not true. Two-wheelers are 2/3 of the total petrol consumption which takes place here. The third factor I've already talked about is that of affordability. And when it comes to affordability, It's not only a theoretical calculation of what will it cost on lifetime rupees per kilometer for operation. You have also to look at the initial cost of the car. Will the person concerned who today is buying a car for 3 lakhs to 5 lakhs be able to afford a car which is substantially more costly? Can your technology hope to succeed if the costs are much higher? Even if financing becomes available, it still requires a larger deposit from the customer. It means a higher monthly EMI. And therefore, you need to calculate that whether the actual cost or actual savings which the customer will get from a particular technology will enable him to pay his EMIs with the minimum amount of running which he does. It also keep in mind the fact that a large proportion of people who buy small cars do not have parking space for these cars at their homes. Again, something which is fairly different from the West, where most people have homes to park their cars. In India, a lot of people do not have homes to park their cars. You see the streets, they're full of cars every evening, and in the day for that matter, because there is no parking space. So all these factors have to be kept in mind. Now, what is it that we can do in the future? Obviously, everybody is aware of the policy for electrifying cars. The challenges in electrifying cars are, however, arising out of the fact that we have 75% small cars. Today's technology for electrifying small cars is such that it leads to the cars becoming beyond the level of purchase affordability for most customers in that range of cars. Plus, a large part of these cars will require infrastructure charging, because if you don't park the car at home, and if you don't have three-phase power of adequate capacity or to charge these big cars which have a 14 kilowatt type of battery, where do you charge the car and how long will it take? And if you do quick charging, will it affect your battery life or not? Mr. Maini is here. The small electric car so far has not had anywhere near mass response to it. It's a very niche kind of product. And therefore, that challenge, unless these challenges of cost, affordability can be met, unless the infrastructure can be built, it will not become a mass use product. You have to look at what time will it take, what kind of investment will it mean, and who will make that kind of investment. The whole logistics of it require to be worked out. You also need to work out that if the whole world goes electric, what will it mean for the resources, including lithium and cobalt or whatever else you require, for the production of batteries? What will happen to prices? What about the disposal of used batteries? What about the availability of energy for charging these batteries? There are a whole lot of questions which, at least I have not found yet convincing, reliable answers to what these questions which raise. So we have to consider this. So in India, it seemed to me that an immediate option for reducing oil imports by making cars in an affordable manner and which will be acceptable to the customers is to use CNG. CNG cars are already in sale today. During the current year, when these fuel prices went up, the sale of CNG cars from the Maruti dealerships went up by 50% over last year's sales. Overall market for cars was growing very slowly this year. Even Maruti has grown at about 9.5% till now. But CNG cars went up by 50%, and this is despite the long queues, which I think all of you have seen at the CNG filling outlets. Customers are willing to bear that inconvenience to buy a CNG car. So if we want to quickly spread CNG cars, and this has been accepted by government, recently the Prime Minister made a statement about use of CNG for cars. The Petroleum Minister has announced that 10,000 new CNG outlets for filling cars will be made available till 2030. The question is how to build this infrastructure quickly, effectively, and in a manner which will lead to both convenience to the person using the CNG and will also result in the person making the investment for CNG getting a reasonable return on his investment. It doesn't always happen. Policy doesn't take into account the concerns of the investor as to whether that investor is going to get his return or not, because somehow it's thought that it's a national need and people should invest without making an adequate return. It doesn't happen. So that's the area which I think today is the lowest hanging fruit available for India in terms of CNG cars. In addition to CNG cars, biofuels are also becoming increasingly important, and I think we have to go to see to what extent we can use biofuels, because that too will lead to the reduction of oil consumption and the import of oil. Oil imports will still grow, I'm afraid, because the cars are growing and the vehicles are growing, two-wheelers are growing. The third technology available today is hybrids. At the moment, government policy does not promote hybrids because the GST levels have been kept at an extra 15% over the normal car level even. What was the normal car level? It's equal to a normal car, and the hybrid costs extra money. So that is again something which needs to be covered. Overall, I think one needs to understand that between now and 2030, the number of cars which will be added to India, if we grow at about 8% or so per year, is going to be 70 million, 70. The car population today is just under 30 million. That will grow by another 70 million and reach 100 million. The sale of cars in 2030 would be close to 10 million cars a year. If electrification proceeds well, the best estimates I have come across of what can happen by 2030 is that out of the 10 million cars, 3 million cars will become electric cars. 3 million cars a year at that point will probably be higher than what any country except China will be producing at that point of time. I don't think any country has a plan to make 3 million cars a year for local consumption by 2030. So it's quite a challenge to make 3 million cars, but let us assume we make 3 million cars by that time. What will it mean for the 70 million cars which we'll produce from now? It's very easy to do a calculation from starting from virtually zero electric cars to going up to 3 million cars. And the answer you come up with is that 15% of the 70 million cars, which is roughly about 10 million cars, will become electric cars by 2030. 60 million cars will be produced between now and 2030, which are non-electric cars, against the 30 million existing today. So when people worry what's going to happen to our conventional cars, it's a frightening figure that the conventional car population will grow from the existing 30 million to 90 million, assuming that electric cars become 3 million by 2030. And these technologies of CNG and biofuels and hybrids are required to take care of this 60 million cars, which will be non-electric. Please understand, these other technologies are not interfering with the growth of electric cars, because there we are assuming they will grow to 3 million cars, and various incentives can be given so that they grow to that level of 3 million cars. But despite that, it would be a big mistake in mobility policy to forget the impact on oil imports, on security of supplies, on environment, if we do not provide for reducing oil consumption by the remaining 60 million cars. And I think that policymakers have to take into account. Two-wheelers, which consume 2/3 of the petrol. Two-wheelers do not have the option either of CNG or hybridization, to some extent biofuels. What to do with two-wheelers? The answer to two-wheelers clearly that the only way you can cut down on oil consumption is electric two-wheelers. China and Taiwan have already gone pretty far in that direction. But the rest of the world doesn't need this two-wheeler technology. And the problem which we have in India with most of our two-wheeler makers is that none of them apparently today have the technology to make electric two-wheelers which will be affordable and which will perform to the satisfaction of the customers. Because customer satisfaction is important. So this is one area where I think a lot of work needs to be done urgently on how to quickly electrify the two-wheeler population. The advantage in two-wheelers electrification is also that the owners of two-wheelers park their two-wheelers at home. They don't park them some distance away on the roadside. And when you park it at home, these two-wheelers which have small batteries, these batteries can be charged by the normal power point in the house. Two-wheelers run only about, on an average, 50 kilometers a day, well within the capacity of a 1 to 1.5 kilowatt-hour battery which can go into a two-wheeler. And therefore, in terms of infrastructure for charging, the requirements will be minimal only for a small number of customers who run more than the average of 50 or 80, because this battery of 1.5 kilowatt hour will take you to 80 kilometers or 90 kilometers a day use. So it's well above the 50 kilometer average. And therefore, you have to have only limited amount of infrastructure for emergency use. So this for two-wheelers is required. Commercial vehicles. Here again, electrification of heavy commercial vehicles has not been found so far to be feasible anywhere. Europe, all the intercity two-wheeler commercial vehicle transport is done by LNG using trucks. And I think here also we have to look at using LNG for our trucks. Again, policy has not yet pushed anybody in that direction. Very little is happening in technology. But if we want to improve our transportation systems, I think we have to move to LNG. Make in India. And there, the batteries today, there's very little battery making. Suzuki has put up a battery plant. I think somebody else is making, by a battery plant, I mean, where you start by making the cell, not by importing the cells and assembling it into a battery pack. But we need to make complete batteries in India, because importing batteries for the millions and millions of vehicles which have to be electrified will be quite inconsistent with the Make in India policy, which will mean huge import of in terms of foreign exchange required for imports, and would not be the right thing. The same thing applies to the motors required for electric vehicles. They have to be made in India. And therefore, manufacturing capacity for these millions and millions of vehicles which are there in India, which need to be made, has to be set up. If we have to get technology, we need to have a policy which will permit technology to come. It will not come if we are very, very restrictive in terms of our willingness to pay royalty. Recently, related party companies have been restricted in royalty to 2%. Nobody is going to give you technology today on this kind of requirements at 2%. So I think the policy for mobility has to be a little bit more holistic. It has to look at all the aspects of making, how to do infrastructure, how to get over the huge delays which take place in constructing infrastructure. I'm talking of the infrastructure for CNG, that the CNG companies tell me it takes 2 years to get permissions from various authorities to dig and put in a pipeline. You can't do that way. It has to be something like an ease of doing business for infrastructure construction. But I think the challenges are very clear to us. I think it's time we started looking at the picture of mobility a little bit more holistically, and then I think we can move in the direction which we all want and use all technologies available, whether it's electric, CNG, hybrids, whatever it is, to solve our problems of mobility. Thank you very much.
Since opportunities like this don't come very often, I would like to invite the editor of ET Auto, Naveel Khan, to please engage, sir, with a fireside chat of sorts and make it interactive. Let's pick his brain. Let's get a sense of his vision for what the future of mobility looks like by way of question and answer.
Rather than I coming between him and you, I would now open the floor for questions from the audience. That will be better because the opportunity comes very less that people are able to interact with a legend like Mr. Bhargava. So the floor is open for the audience to ask questions. We can take 2-3 questions, not more than that. Thank you.
So right here, on your left, straight up ahead. Thank you. Thank you very much for your address, sir. My name is Akshat Batra. I represent SL Honda, which is a Honda two-wheeler dealership business in Uttarakhand. I'd love to get your insight on the future of the automobile dealer with a special focus on two-wheelers, in light of the fact that with electrification, especially with the two-wheeler business, the service revenue is expected to go down. And there are alternative channels of sales in the form of online sales, etc., directly from the OEM. So what is your take on the future of the automobile dealer in the new value chain that comes up? And if you could, I'm sorry, elucidate the same with your best estimate of timelines. Thank you.
It's certainly the extent of service requirements for electric vehicles will be much less than it is for the petrol ICE vehicles. But the requirements of service will not go down. The requirement of a workshop will still be very much there with the dealership. And I think even with electric mobility, while people can certainly look at the vehicles on the net and study the different options, before they buy the vehicle, most of them are likely to visit a dealership to look at the vehicle and touch and feel as we do when we look at a product like a car. Possibly the dealerships will become smaller in size. Possibly the workshops will become smaller in size. But the requirements for them will not go away.
Hello, good afternoon, sir. This is Anuj from the World Auto Forum. First of all, many thanks for this masterclass on automotive and its future. I wish to ask you that presently, the hybrid vehicles, as even you mentioned, they are not that incentivized for, public acceptance. But isn't this true that when we need to take people, if we need to take people from IC engine to 100% EV, then possibly a plug-in hybrid can be a sort of mid-stop, A, to get them used to, an EV, and B, to have less of range anxiety and a backup. What are your views on this?
No, as I said, I think looking at the total volume of vehicles to produce, we need all the technologies. Policy should certainly make electric vehicles more attractive for the buyer than hybrid vehicles. But it doesn't mean that hybrid vehicles should become disincentivized altogether so that customers don't want to buy them. It's not this extreme or that extreme. I think there are a lot of areas in between where you can have a graded program of seeing that the incentives for the electric vehicle sales are maximum, so customers buy that. But if a customer wants to buy something other than electric vehicle, because as I said, At best, 15% of the vehicles produced from now to 30 will be electric vehicles. What are you going to do with these vehicles if you say that don't allow any other technology? Is that the better answer, or to say that, yes, we'll allow the other technologies, but at a thing while people can still afford to buy them, but electric vehicles will be more attractive?
Mr. Bhargav, question here.
Sure.
Yeah. If China can make 12 million two-wheelers, and India only makes about 12,000, most of them still imported, what in your mind is the biggest impediment to implementing the electric two-wheeler? Is it just pure battery manufacturing? And I understand the Prime Minister in your meeting a week before asked a lot of people to come up and put up battery manufacturing facilities. Why is nobody coming up for that?
I think two-wheeler manufacturers in India haven't, and government hasn't either, made a policy for two-wheelers become electric. A policy for cars becoming electric was made, or at least some statements were made on that and what government would like to do. But I haven't seen statements coming out that we would like all the two-wheelers to become electric by 2030 or by 2040 or whatever date is fixed. And I think companies haven't got the technology for making electric two-wheelers, as I said, which are going to be as good for customers to use as the ICE two-wheelers.
But with so many manufacturers of electric two-wheelers in China, do you think the technology is really that complicated? I think Chetan can...
I don't know. I'm not a two-wheeler manufacturer.
No, I mean, I have experienced that a lot, and I think the technology is absolutely simple, except for the lithium-ion battery. There's really not much into that.
Well, then somebody can start lithium-ion battery manufacture here. Why not? It's a huge business. We'll have millions and millions of batteries to be sold.
So you mentioned, you quoted a lot of examples how global EV adoption is happening in cars, right? And how we are a small car market, but we sell 25% of not just small cars. So globally, I mean, if we keep following that track, globally EV adoption doesn't happen from the lowest end of the market. It starts from the top end of the market, right? No one is trying to sell a 5 lakh equivalent car in US or China as well, right? So why do we have to start from bottom in India? Like, Maruti doesn't have to do it, but there are people who make big cars. And it makes a lot more sense because the GST rates is 50% and 48%. And as you said, like two-wheelers, people who have big cars usually have big homes as well, where they park their cars, right? And also, in big car, the battery proportionate value of the car is much lower because you do a lot of other frills around it. So why do we keep talking about mass market to begin with? Mass market can happen later, but something can happen now, which is high up-end cars, right?
No, I'm not quite sure if I understand what you're trying to say. But the fact is, the reality in India today is that the bulk of the owners of vehicles and those who are buying vehicles are people who can't afford the kind of prices which the big cars command. And in any case, the infrastructure in India does not allow people and everybody to have large cars. People have to have small cars because that's what the infrastructure permits you to use in India. It's not like that in all parts of the world.
Thank you, sir. That's all that we have time for this afternoon, but sir is with us throughout the course of the day, so I ask that you please engage him one-on-one. A huge round of applause once more.